Hello there, and welcome to the second edition of the Digital Foundry Q&A show. This is the show where we take select questions from the DF Supporter Program and discuss them. This one, though, is slightly strange because after we filmed the last episode of DF Direct Weekly, a gigaton news event happened. Phil Spencer is retiring from Xbox after a long and illustrious career. 38 years, man, that's even longer than me by 2 years. And we were kind of the belief that Sarah Bond would be taken over. It did seem that she was being groomed for the role. However, she's leaving as well, and we have a new EVP and CEO coming in the form of Asha Sharma. The supporter question is from Retro Sean. This will no doubt make it into the Q&A show. It's probably too late for the direct, correct? But thoughts about the sudden departure of Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond from Xbox. This reminds me of when the CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, quote unquote, retired before he was able to see his plans come to fruition. John, I'm going to come to you first on this. This is kind of crazy news, right? I mean, it is effectively a complete reorganization of top Xbox level management.
Yeah, indeed. And it's a delicate, interesting topic. And this is so I think it's fair to say that the last few years have been rough for Xbox. We all quite liked Phil. He did, he worked with us well, he cared about what Digital Foundry was doing. We got that opportunity to see Series X and Series S before its release. You got to see the Xbox One X before release. Like there was a good rapport there, I think, and I think they tried a lot of things, and I think Phil himself was a guy that really cared about this stuff, and I always had good chats with him on this. So, but 38 years, a long time. That's certainly, I can understand the desire to move on, and I do think that a lot of the things that have happened to Xbox are not necessarily directly tied to what he would have liked to have done. This is just spitballing here, but it's very clear in recent years that Microsoft as a company has shifted gears and is now extremely focused on AI, like some of these other tech companies, to the point of like borderline ruin to a degree. Like, not that they're not making money, but like it feels like everything that's not AI is not valuable to the current leadership there. And thus, that part's concerning. But at the same time, I do understand why changes would need to be made here, perhaps, because I do think the last 3 or 4 years of Xbox, despite them finally starting to deliver some truly excellent games from their stable of developers, it hasn't gone well for the platform itself. Even though I see the value in it, I still think that they made some key mistakes along the way. I don't think Game Pass was ever going to remain a viable thing, and it was always going to come to this. The price was going to go up. It was going to, cause a lot of issues for various parties. Even though the deal was pretty nuts, it's less so now, but I just didn't think it was sustainable, and I think that's still very much the case. And I don't think Satya is interested in just continuing to throw money into that specifically, not when that money could go to Copilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then things like, oh man, it's really difficult to say what could have worked or if there even was a way out of this, because the game, on top of everything, like the game world is just changing a lot these days, and it's in Xbox. Just, man, they never fully recovered from what happened with the shift to Xbox One, I feel.
Right.
And I'm not sure what else they could have done to really save this at that point. Like, I mean, the PS5 is selling on par with the PS4, right? And yet Sony's release this generation has arguably been one of their worst. Like, there's been amazing games coming from them, but there's barely anything compared to before. This could have been a great time for them to strike, but they just weren't able to pull it off. And, so I understand this change, but I'm definitely nervous because putting somebody that's clearly with an AI background into place, I don't know, man. I really don't know what to think yet. But also, I think you can't just like, people put a lot of like, I guess they assign so much to like these singular people that are at the in charge of these divisions, and they are important, but there's so much more that matters in terms of how a business performs and the direction they go in. And that has a lot to do with the team running all this stuff and the ones that are actually getting this stuff done. So we can't just look at one person. Maybe this new person is will be able to support those teams and those everyone and give them the resources they need to succeed and find a new life for Xbox. Maybe their vision of what Xbox will be is something totally different. I mean, it's all stuff we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of carry on from what you said, yeah, we do know Phil as well as a journalist can know Phil, I guess. Yeah, he's always been very open with us. He's always been supportive as much as he can be. And he also recognizes constructive criticism. And, we've certainly given them a lot of that. So, I'm going to miss him because, he was forthright with us, and we do value that. And Sarah was great as well at the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, I think I only met her that one time, and it was good.
So, it's really sort of, the amount of heat these guys get when you've met them in real life and when you see them as real people. It's, there's a sort of weird disconnect there. In terms of what's happened with Xbox, clearly it's a time of transition, right? And it's still a time of transition, and they've tried their best to navigate the waters there, but I think it's been very, very challenging. And the whole 4 games thing, it's just going to live on forever, really. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like a bit of a fumble, I think. In terms of what happens next, obviously Asha Sharma is now taking over. But you're quite right, John. Basically the concept that somebody who may not have a great background in games is taking over a team on the surface might not be great, but at the same time, they're taking over a team. Do they have to be like a hardcore gamer? Phil, to be fair, Phil was very much into his games.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we met up in those times, like he could actually hold his own in terms of like understanding, and not just like Xbox stuff, but like games in general across all platforms. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That was interesting.
He was deeply committed.
And I think that's cool. And I do appreciate when leadership actually cares, because I do think it helps determine what's allowed to get made and but obviously if there's people above him that are pushing in other ways, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but going back maybe to the reveal of the PlayStation 4, which was a massively successful system for Sony, it was Andrew House leading that presentation, if memory serves. And it's not as if people were thinking, wow, Andrew House, such a great game.
Exactly.
That's not the way things work in massive corporate structures.
No.
So, I think Asha Sharma needs to be given the benefit of the doubt. Let's talk about some of the stuff she's going to be championing as the new CEO of Xbox. First of all, great games, she says. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, right? This one is curious, though. Second, the return of Xbox. We will recommit to our core Xbox fans and players, those who have invested with us for the past 25 years, and to the developers who build the expansive universes and experiences that are embraced by players across the world. They're talking about, or she's talking about rather, celebrating our roots with a renewed commitment to Xbox, starting with console, which has shaped who we are. The final thing, the future of play, new business models and new ways to play by leaning into what we already have, iconic teams, characters, and worlds that people love. But we will not treat those worlds as static IP, to milk and monetize. We will build a shared platform and tools that empower developers and players to create and share their own stories. And then there is a sort of discussion about the evolution of monetization and AI. Yes, I mean, in terms of that statement, I'm still not entirely sure what it means. The return of Xbox, I guess we've got new hardware coming along, but, everything that we've heard about the hardware suggests that it's quite different to what we've seen before. There seems to be a commitment here, or certainly a reassurance to hardcore Xbox players that, hey, they're still invested in console. But to what extent are they? This new machine sounds incredible, but it also sounds incredibly expensive, which is kind of like the antithesis of what a console is about. I don't think you can suddenly expect to see massive U-turns from Microsoft just because of a change in leadership. These U-turns take years to execute, if indeed there is a U-turn. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the future holds, but obviously I wish Asha Sharma the best. Alex?
Yeah, my goodness. Well, one thing that I even commented on online about this is it coming out on a late Friday night, this news story from our perspective in the EU time zones. That doesn't actually sound nearly as promising or as good of a thing as in announcing it on a Monday to start the week. Just to say.
Well, you're quite right, Alex. Bad news is always put out on a Friday.
Yeah, so that really tainted my opinion of as everything was, because it does, there's not a lot of time for the press to react to it. Maybe the markets aren't reacting to it for purposeful reasons. So that was not a great thing. And then I read immediately that it's someone coming from an AI and not a games background. And while that does align with the current future of Microsoft, maybe it doesn't align with what I prioritize when I'm interested in looking at games from a publisher, as I view Microsoft at the moment, and less so a console development house. I don't view them as such anymore for a while now, and I think a lot of people don't. So all those things really didn't make me feel super positive about the story. And I'm still very open. I guess I'll be open to this new person, Asha Sharma, coming in and seeing what they do for it. But that's going to take a while to actually see what the effects of this are. And yeah, I'll be open, but I don't have a lot of confidence at the moment. Regarding the legacy of Phil Spencer specifically, I just want to reiterate that, like what John and Rich said, whenever we met with Phil, very personable person, easy to talk about games with. Listen to my critiques about shader compilation stutter, of all the things to complain to Phil Spencer about. Well, I mean, it's very important for the next box, so I think that's something that was good. And all that stuff for the next box was shaped by the team, the previous team. So it'll be interesting to see what extra twists come towards the end of the development of this current Xbox that's going to be coming out that bear the mark of Asha Sharma and their team on this. Whether or not it has more in the name itself, it's called like the Xbox AI box. I'm very curious to see like how if it's called something, I know you're joking about it, John, the co-pilot box or something like that.
You're feeding into John's nightmares.
I know,
here.
but it's hard to.
This is like mind games, psychological
it feels
mind
that way.
games.
Like I was half expecting them to make the new CEO co-pilot itself.
Yeah, right. Why do we even need these people? Yeah, so, I think Phil did as well as a job as anyone really could for a lot of aspects of Xbox's business, given what happened after Xbox One. I think the focus on Series X and Xbox One X was great, a higher power, something focusing about core gamer. Series S decision in the end is the thing that sold the most, but whether I like what its effect was on the entire industry, sometimes it's debatable. Whether I think that was a good idea or not, it depends on the day of the week. So I have in terms of the legacy of the business, I'm less than positive always with regards to Phil's career, but I think, a good person who listened to criticism, which is great.
Some supporter reactions here. Joe Tanko says, Phil Spencer gave a shout out on Twitter to Jeff Gertzman after his departure from Giant Bomb. Furthermore, I'm sure he okayed DF being allowed in on the Xbox Series S secret too. Phil was someone who had his finger on the pulse of gaming culture, so seeing him replaced by an AI exec just goes to show the direction of travel for Microsoft. No question here, just an observation. Alan, the infamous Alan from the Discord, the legendary Alan from the Discord. Hi, guys. I don't think Phil Spencer retired. More likely given the option to save face. Asha Sharma, president of Microsoft's core AI product, said, as monetization and AI evolve and influence this future, we will not chase short-term efficiency or flood our ecosystem with soulless AI slop. Well, considering how invested in AI Microsoft are, I don't believe her. So I do think it's pretty clear that there is a degree of trust that needs to be earned here. And I guess we could only wait to see what happens. Actually, going back to what Joe was saying there about the Series S secret, that was that was quite an interesting story. I'm sure Phil was involved, of course.
Yeah,
I mean,
naturally,
he was there when we first saw the Series S. But
that was funny because you're right. It wasn't it. Everything else had been so planned out, and I'm sure this was too. But we're just talking in the corner there with Phil and other people, and then Sarah just comes in with the handbag and like, oh yeah, we want to show you this real quick.
Yeah, and we did have a sort of NDA that only would expire when Microsoft said it would expire.
Right.
On that, so we had to keep quiet on that for like 6 or 7 months. That was quite interesting. But just going back to the Xbox One X stuff that we did, I think back in 2017. Yeah. I'm sure Phil signed that off, but it was actually Albert Pinello that was my main point of contact there, who we lost recently.
What a nice guy, man.
Really?
Yeah, and super, super into his games. And I mean, it's when you're a journalist, it's kind of weird to have friends in executive C-suites. But when he left Microsoft, he did become a friend, and I was devastated when we lost him.
Yeah.
Going back to the topic, though, I don't really know what more there is to add. There's, Asha Sharma saying that I guess that the things that people want to hear, and I hope it's followed through with action. But I do think that the plans that Microsoft have in place have been in place for a long, long time. Stuff like reaching out to the community war and that sort of thing is kind of like no-brainer stuff that should have been happening anyway.
And they had for a while, and then
but I think they realized that associations with the more toxic levels of discourse online probably weren't a great idea. They had to redefine that. But it was a bit of a shame that we had fewer Xbox P3 tweets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, so the thing Alan brings up here also kind of ties into my earlier point. When you read something like the soulless AI slop written in there, to me, this feels extremely engineered to speak to people that actually think this from somebody that doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I feel like those words are very specifically chosen for a reason, especially given how Satya himself was against that word earlier this year in that blog, where he was very mad about people calling AI stuff slop. Right. So like, to me, this feels like it's very specifically targeting people. So the whole thing just feels weird. Not to say I'm not willing to give somebody a chance, of course. Like, there's just things about it that make me go like, oh, like, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really think there's too much more to add to that. What I will say, though, is I'm just wondering how much of all of this is kind of like sort of downstream ramifications of that Activision Blizzard King acquisition.
Oh, almost certainly.
Which, in retrospect, based on what's happened with those franchises, there's the sense that they bought at peak, and it was just downhill from there for the likes of Call of Duty. I saw I don't know whether it was verified, but there was a story I saw about how they're possibly going to turn away from an annualized Call of Duty.
Good, they should.
They should, but when you think about the amount of money that it takes to make a Call of Duty, to sustain a Call of Duty, with all of those different teams and whatnot, then actually it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, I get it.
The burn rate to create a Call of Duty game is such that I think they kind of need to make a new one every year just to sustain it. So what's the alternative if you're not doing that? Firing people? I don't know how that all works out. But yeah, that's kind of like, that was kind of seen as like the killer move from Microsoft to kind of really sort of...
It was killer, just in the wrong sense.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what can I say? Let's just wait to see what happens. There's little more we can do. I guess the next step is basically what happens next with the next generation Xbox, and the extent to which it can be a console in the traditional sense and can connect with the core audience in the traditional sense, which is kind of what they seem to be suggesting here. But how can it, based on everything we've heard? We need to hear more.
I think the final thing to say here is that they really need, I really hope the development studios owned by Microsoft are continued to allow to operate, because I feel like they're finally, in the last couple of years, we're seeing really good results. Like a lot of great games coming out of Microsoft and a lot more on the way. And I'm bummed out about some of the cancellations, but I do feel like they're awake and doing what they need to do again after years of struggling to get back here. And I would hate for leadership to come in and tear that stuff down. So hopefully they do not.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. Okay, we've got this question here from Ali Al-Mutawa. Hello, DFers, long-time listener, first-time caller, exclamation point. With the changing landscape of gaming, Xbox turning to a PC and Steam releasing a console, do you think it's better for Sony to release a PC launcher or stick to the console market? So, Alex, an interesting question here, the extent to which everybody is basically chasing bigger audiences and basically going multi-platform, for want of a better phrase.
Yes.
And well, we've got this Death Stranding 2 PC port coming along. I guess Sony is the publisher of that, I guess. But yeah, what's happening? Because the Sony PC effort seems to have stalled somewhat, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, in terms of releases, they had a flurry, and I think that actually had a bottom line influence on the quality of the ports, which decreased over time. Till you landed with Spider-Man 2, which launched in a non-shippable state, in my humble opinion. Well, I mean, we didn't cover it for the purpose of
because we thought it was just going to evolve and get better and better, similar to what we saw with like The Last of Us Part 1. But actually, it hasn't really got that much better.
No, it has not. Yeah, it's still not that great, apparently. So I think that I don't know that I can only guess at the internal reasons why they slowed down on those efforts versus looking into the back catalog of previously portable titles and not working on those too. Like I really thought there was a missed opportunity for Demon Souls remake. There was a missed opportunity for Gran Turismo. The Legacy Uncharted titles, Legacy God of War titles, because they're bringing out all this God of War stuff, right? Including Ragnarok. It was a little bit surprised to not see them dipping into the back catalog to the PS4 gen, but I don't know, maybe that's all Jim Ryan influenced stuff because, you know, who plays retro games? But I think at this point in time, given the fact that Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is releasing on Steam, like all their other previous titles have been, I think, and the learnings that we see from Ubisoft and co, that I think you can't, or even EA, you can't really not release stuff on Steam. You kind of have to release stuff on Steam. And the benefit you'd get from going to a dedicated launcher for these titles, I don't know a soul who'd be really super interested in splitting up their Steam account for the purpose of that. If it was a GOG release, I would be interested, but that is an entirely different topic. So I really think the ship has sailed long ago after Origin changed its name and bit the dust, which is such a slap in the face name, Origin. Geez. I think that's all long gone, and we've seen Epic try and make inroads and then not make nearly as many as they thought they could and should. And no one can, you have to also offer so much more than Steam to really start taking away people from buying a game on Steam, I think. And if free games all the time wasn't enough from Epic to do that, I don't know what Sony could offer that would be better.
Yeah. What do you think, John? Do you think there is actually, I mean, if they're going to fully embrace PC, they've got to fully embrace PC. And that means a lot of things that I don't think they want to do. For example, day and date releases.
Yep. I have an inkling that they're pulling away from PC. We'll watch this space, but I can't help, based on some of the decisions and the way things have been going lately, I get the feeling that under the current leadership that PC has become less important. One might argue that the Jim Ryan era, the one positive thing to come out of it is this shift to PC, but I'm not confident that they have like a huge vision for PC going forward. Not to say that we won't still see some PC games happening, but I think it's not going to become more PC focused. I think if anything, it's going to become less. And we'll see. I mean, maybe that's not the case at all, but and this is the reason I don't think that they would ever consider like saying like a PC launcher, like going bigger on PC at the expense of console. I think console is where they want to be. And
Yeah.
I think, I mean, they've continued to succeed in that area despite themselves, I would argue,
Right.
with some of the decisions this generation. But also, man, yeah, there's just, it's hard to say. I mean, we really can't predict the future on this stuff. Obviously, it's just, I feel like Nintendo and Sony are really just going to stick to their guns for now. And I think Microsoft's Xbox situation, just the nature of Xbox and the fact that they're so big on PC anyway, it makes more sense there. You know, if you own Windows, why not focus on it? Make it better though too, but but still,
Right.
you know what I mean? Whereas for Sony, I mean, I would like to think they're smart enough now to know that, yeah, doing a launcher like this would be like the worst possible idea ever. They would not, it would kill whatever PC focus they have left.
Yeah, I think the only sort of argument for potentially doing a PC launcher is like cross buy with your console purchase, which I don't think they're going to do anyway.
I don't think they want to do that. I just don't, especially because so far, at least, their PC stuff usually tends to come a bit later, right? So it's like
quite a bit,
which is not unsmart, shall we say? Because I do think like when you re-release a game later, it gives it a second wind, so to speak. I do believe this is precisely why Rockstar Games is always so adamant about shipping first on console, then they do PC, and then maybe other platforms after that, right? I think that PC push is a big deal to them, and they get a lot from it. And I think Sony probably feels the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I agree with that, but I think it's been, for Sony at least, very game dependent. Like,
sure,
I don't
multiplayer stuff, for instance.
Yeah, I meant more about the late release being a good strategy thing, just because we've seen in the past before where people just didn't care as much.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's
been title dependent. People gave a damn about Ghost of Tsushima, but they didn't give a damn about, like, I don't know. Apparently, stuff like Ragnarok didn't sell nearly as much as they would have liked. So, yeah.
Okay, let's move on. A question here from Buffalo X8,
which is a reference to Buffalo, etc., etc.
Okay,
Stupid.
Okay, that's just beyond me. Sorry. The question is this: is the best argument for getting the PS5 Pro actually the PS6? I can't see enough of a difference between PS5 and Pro. However, since cross-gen games will likely be downgraded to 30 FPS on PS5, do you think the Pro will be the cheaper alternative to a PS6 that will still run games at 60 FPS? I don't know what you think, John, but the Pro is basically of the PlayStation 5 generation. The question is the extent to which Sony are still wedded to the idea of console generations going forward, which is kind of like, you know, they made a statement that they were with PlayStation 5, but then we had like suddenly a huge amount of cross-gen games that stretched like quite a long time across the generation. And then there's sort of like the hardware capabilities. That CPU isn't really going to be getting any better. So there'll be certain games that just will have to run based on the constraints of PS5 level rather than, you know, what the extra GPU stuff can give you. I don't know. It's tricky one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, answering his question directly, I don't think that is like a situation where we will have games that are 30 FPS on a base PS5 that are suddenly like a stable 60 on Pro. That's I mean, just owing to the CPU alone, it's just not going to be a thing that happens, right? So I don't think that this idea of like the PS5 Pro being the cheaper alternative that will run games at 60. Not that I think, I mean, we don't, man.
I think the danger is there's going to be not enough PS5 Pros out there for developers to really make the full use of its capabilities.
I think that's also partially, yeah. Like these things are value add consoles. I think they're really cool and interesting, but like it's still part of the generation, and that does. And let's look at it this way: Xbox Series S versus Xbox One X. There are areas where Xbox One X is superior to Series S, right?
Yeah.
But if this logic were applied to that generation, it would not have held water. And it did not come to pass at all, did it? And
No.
we had a lot of cross-gen, but as we saw, there's, the One X actually, it did not deliver what this is proposing here. And in fact, it felt like it became almost of an afterthought to a degree, where it didn't receive the optimizations it could have. So it didn't leverage its strengths over Series S. And as a result, Series S usually ended up with better versions of things. Although it had its own limitations in slightly other areas too, but still, I think you should never buy like, I'm going to buy this mid-gen console in preparation for the next generation is a bad strategy.
No, it's just basically to enjoy the games of this generation, with enhancements.
Yeah.
Alex, this is basically like custom RDNA 2 with extra RT and machine learning bits versus RDNA 5.
Yeah.
You kind of suspect it's going to be no competition, really.
I really don't think. I mean, we'll have to see. Obviously, the RDNA 5, although it's talked about and hyped up a lot, maybe we'll have to see what it means when it's brought out in console form, given other constraints in terms of memory speed, all these other things. But I do think it'll be quite a bit different. The fact that it required 1 full year to port what would be FSR 4 or longer to a PSSR 2.0, which we still have yet to see, it just shows you that there's limitations there in the PS5 Pro on the GPU side. And the main limiting factor, as you guys point out, would be that CPU actually. And I don't think there's going to be a big, it would be a really weird scenario where a developer says, we have extra GPU performance, let's make the game 60 FPS on a PS5 Pro, but not drop res on a PS5 to do the same thing. I'm trying to think of what type of game that would be, and I'm just not sure if it exists at the moment, that type of design. So I don't think so. I also think, like John said, this value add console idea, it was already a little bit teetering sometimes on Xbox One X, where we would see, like John described, upgrades where we could have seen it being better. Like they would keep sometimes things at Xbox One standards, but then just up the res, which is like, we should.
Yeah, there were a number of titles, particularly in the latter stages, once Series X had come along, where there was an Xbox One version of the game, and it was slightly enhanced for Xbox One X, but some of the cutbacks made for the original Xbox One version permeated into the One X version, which is kind of like, what's going on here? That doesn't really make sense.
And there wasn't good reasons for that, and I think due to the development ease of it, and we've already seen it quite more often than not sometimes with PS5 Pro, is that the upgrade is just like we increase the res. Not every developer goes the extra mile to add in an extra GPU feature.
I think my final point on this one is basically a lot of it may depend on the nature of the development environment that Sony provides for PlayStation 6. Will it be basically the same development environment as PlayStation 5? So you would possibly be able to tap into like features that are in the SDK, or will it be separate, as was the case with PS4 and PS5? Microsoft had this attempt to basically unify the generations in terms of development with the GDK. So maybe they'll go down that route, but at the same time, I still think developers will be focusing, on where they get the best return on their investment, and the Pro is going to be like a vanishingly small amount of the overall audience that they're going to be addressing.
Right.
Got this question here from Todd Weitzel. What do you make of the statement on the Sony's earnings call about mitigating the memory price impact by quote unquote monetizing the installed base? John, I guess my question would be, how do you plan to monetize the installed base? That's the thing. What, increase the price of games? That's the only one I can actually think that could actually work, because the thing about monetizing the installed base is that the installed base still need to actually choose how they spend their money.
Right.
Yes, indeed. May I remind you, Rich, of a patent from several years ago?
I already know what this is.
Imagine this: you're playing your game, all of a sudden you see a big juicy burger on your screen, and the game says, "Say McDonald's" to end commercial. So you stand up, put your arms up, and go McDonald's, and then it ends.
Right. Okay.
Right. Maybe
that sounds pretty horrific.
The time is now. And Sony's patent from however many years ago is now coming to fruition.
Right. Well, there is the ad-supported cloud tier that
there we go.
Microsoft is apparently experimenting with. I was just suddenly reminded of those, that TV release of Star Wars.
Oh, yes.
I think it was on some South American release where basically they seamlessly merged in like beer commercials with the footage of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Yeah. That would be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? Or you're just sort of starting Ghost of Yoti and there's sort of some weird product placements going on there.
I'm thinking more advertisements. Sounds like it, more into the dashboard. I mean, I already have advertisements in Windows, right? Like, why not at this point? Everything is not sacred anymore. I think it's going to be stuff like that. I think probably more microtransactions in single player content if they do produce single player content. So you can expect there's going to be microtransactions in the remakes of God of War 1 through 3. Replace him with later Kratos models, or get the axe from the sequel games, etc.
This is all sounding really
well.
Really
I
good.
mean, but like the statement is it's ambiguous enough to allow you. I mean, what else could they do other than keep selling you games? They're already selling us games. They need to make some more money off us. How?
I guess they could increase the subscription costs, which wouldn't be great. I guess they could. Hey, what about games as a service? That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, right.
Maybe not. This is one of those wait and see things, isn't it? But it doesn't sound great, and it doesn't sound like a particularly great strategy either. Mitigating the memory price impact. So the memory price impact is only going to apply to. That's the kind of weird thing, right? Because at this point in the console generation, the people that don't have a PlayStation 5 are going to be the ones that are probably not going to be giving too much money to Sony via, platform-specific stuff.
Right.
Are they likely to be using a more expensive PlayStation Plus subscription? Seems unlikely. The concept of the existing installed base having to pay for cheaper consoles for newcomers is pretty grim. I think ultimately the answer to this question, though, is we don't know, but it doesn't sound great.
No.
Let's move on. Some guy person asks 3 anecdotes to form one question. You guys have heard that some developers are targeting the quote-unquote mainstream PC as their reference target platform and not the PS5. I don't think we have heard that, but anyway. RAMageddon is forcing people to hold on to their cars longer, so the Steam survey results will be the reality of the market for some time to come. According to the Steam survey, 1/3 of all GPUs have 8 gigs of memory, 1/3 have more than 8 gigs of memory, and 1/3 have less than 8 gigs of memory. Question: how will RAMageddon impact game design decisions? What concessions will we see more of in the concept of a game? What features will we see less of? What innovations will have greater impact on maximizing the limited pools of memory we're seeing? I'm hoping the software side of things is brighter than the hardware side in the near term. Going back to the first point, I think it was an exec that said to us that maybe challenged our viewpoint that the reference platform is a mainstream PC and not the PS5. I don't know what you think, John. It's not kind of like how we've heard things from developers, but maybe we're just in a small niche. But Alex, what do you make of the question? I mean, the question. I mean, basically, it's thus far there has been an issue with 8 gigabyte issues with certain AAA games, but ultimately you can play the games. For the most part.
Yeah.
They just look a bit uglier or a lot uglier.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. Hello, some guy person. Thank you for the lovely email, by the way. How will impact game design decisions? I don't think the game design decisions will change because they didn't really change from, November 2020 to now that much. I think game design has remained pretty similar between now and then, beyond the fact there are more games as a service games coming out maybe between now and then, which don't really apply to the 8 gigabyte situation because they run on those cards just perfectly fine. I think what we will see is less concessions in the concept of a game from this. Rather, due to time and the amount of investment in software, we're going to see games getting better at using 8 gigabytes because the market will stagnate. So they want to reach more users. They're going to actually, instead of making 8 gigabyte GPUs, the afterthought that we just quarter res textures for, I think you will see maybe developers pushing on, active streaming more instead of, older designs, things like that. Maybe leveraging new compression technologies that we've talked about in the past, like machine learned texture scaling and stuff.
Do you think that's likely?
I think other than it just being the same status quo as it was for the last 5 years, I think there's just going to be inherently more research into using the resources we currently have better. Epic's already doing it, and they're powering like 60% of games in the AAA space probably, so I think it's not going to be a huge difference, but I think there's going to be just generally hopefully better utilization of the current resources that we have. That's how I kind of view it.
What do you think, John?
I mean, we're at that point in the console generation, I think, where developers are largely settled in with the sort of target they're doing in terms of visuals. And so I think like there will have to be some additional optimization for some PC releases to support certain GPUs, but I think we wouldn't expect any major changes to happen in terms of requirements until the next generation of consoles arrives, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll remain pretty static, I think. And as you said, though, I actually do think like which platform is the target platform does seem to vary per developer, because I've heard it presented in different ways depending on what the studio's goals are. So yeah,
we spoke the other day about the third part of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where basically it is the PC, but it's not specifically a mainstream PC that's their target.
Right.
It's every PC practically, because they want to scale to everything from Steam Deck up to like 5090.
It's all, you pick your lowest device and you make sure that you're getting that provide X amount of experience quality on that device. If Switch 2 is the biggest thing of importance to you, you'll make certain decisions based on that, right? I always go back to what we saw with that second ukulele game, The Impossible Lair. Do you remember that?
Right.
Where, unlike the original, they said specifically, they were like, hey, Switch 1 is the target platform for this game. We want 60 FPS in our game, and all the visuals are built to give you 60 FPS on the Switch 1. And it does scale up from there, but like that was their goal. And I think, every developer has to decide, all right, what is the target where we want our game to look good and run well on this level of machine? Because PC games obviously can scale a lot lower than that if you want, but sometimes I would say the results are not good. It's playable, but it's not, I can't imagine that's how they would want it to be experienced, which suggests that it's not actually the target. It's just good enough to like run it, but that's not what they want people to experience.
Yeah. And I don't impacting game design decisions. I don't think it will make too much of an impact on the types of games that developers are going to be making, certainly in terms of the scalability side of things. But there does seem to be a case that, basically a game that was principally designed for a console, to get it running on a PC with a lower level of available video memory, they just, provide crapper textures or you shouldn't use ray tracing, that sort of stuff. The fact is that they will run, and that's kind of like job done, really, isn't it?
I do think a 8 gigabyte GPU should be the minimum for most like high-end 3D games, though. Trying to target less than that. The problem there is I feel like GPUs that have less than 8 gigabytes probably also don't support any of the rendering features necessary to support those games properly anyways, so it's not something to think about. It's not just a VRAM limitation, but we do know there are 8 gigabyte GPUs that are more than moderate enough to run this stuff, which that's where that whole problem even came from, right? Like the other parts of the GPU scaled up more than the memory did.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's that. I think that was the last question, therefore the end of the show. So please do like, subscribe, share on the off chance you enjoyed it. Big bells for notifications for you and potentially imaginary algorithmic boosts for us. But really, it is all about the DF supporter program. Join us, patreon.com/digitalfoundry. Support the team. Become part of this show. Become part of our amazing community. It's all good stuff. But that's all from us on this. We've got to crack on. There's a ton of work to do. But we'll see you next week.